Hello, you're watching Shalom World News. I'm Dana Villa from Chicago, USA. Here are the latest headlines from around the world. A group of lawyers, doctors, and others from 5 continents converged on March 3rd in Casablanca, Morocco, to demand the abolition of laws that permit or tolerate surrogacy around the world. The group published a signed statement titled International Declaration for the Universal Elimination of Surrogacy to increase public awareness of surrogacy, which it sees as a practice that betrays respect for human dignity. We call on countries to condemn surrogacy in all modalities and kinds. The signatories, who represent more than 70 countries, wrote in their Casablanca Declaration. The city of Casablanca was chosen for the convention as surrogacy is an offense in Morocco. Government leaders on both sides of the Russia-Ukraine war are somewhat reluctant to start negotiations immediately, with NATO expansion imminent and battles raging in the Eastern European nation. Russian President Vladimir Putin's goals of preventing further expansion of the NATO military alliance seem to be under threat. Hungary has sent a delegation to Sweden and Finland on Tuesday to discuss their entry into the NATO military alliance. Both countries want to join amid concerns that Moscow's invasion will slowly spread to other neighboring nations. Hungary is the last European Union country expected to ratify NATO expansion despite its disagreements with Sweden and Finland. Russia views the NATO move as a further threat to its security. The total number of casualties, dead and wounded on the Russian side, is approaching 200,000. Despite this information, there are no indications that the invasion would come to an end anytime soon. British politicians are seeking harsher regulations against pornography to help stop an epidemic of violence against women. A bipartisan analysis shows a sizable portion of mainstream pornography depicting men as being physically violent against women and girls. This serves as the basis for the request on the crackdown. The All-Party Parliamentary Committee on Commercial Sexual Exploitation spearheaded the demand following the highly publicized Wayne Couzens trial in 2021. Couzens, who was 48 at that time, abducted, raped, and killed 33-year-old Sarah Everard. His former co-worker said in court that the disgraced policeman had an attraction to horrific sexual pornography, according to the Daily Mail. Police in Birmingham, England, has once again arrested pro-life champion Isabel Von Spruce for praying silently outside a closed abortion clinic. This comes a little more than 2 weeks after the 45-year-old was acquitted on the same charges. Spruce was arrested by West Midlands Police on Monday for standing near the British Pregnancy Advisory Services clinic in the Kings Norton area in Birmingham. An online video posted on Twitter by ADF UK, the British arm of Alliance Defending Freedom, shows Von Spruce being told by unidentified police officer that her silent prayer is an offense against Public Spaces Protection Order that bans protest by graphic, verbal, or written means of prayer or counseling. Pope Francis met with priests, deacons, seminarians, and staff from St. Mary's Seminary from Cleveland, Ohio, here in the U.S. on Monday morning. The seminary is celebrating its 175th anniversary. The Holy Father thanked God for the many priests who had been trained at the seminary over nearly 2 centuries to help God's holy people in living their call to be missionary disciples, pointing out that the seminary still carries out this goal today by educating and training deacons and lay ministers. Pope Francis highlighted 3 key elements: listening to the Lord, walking together, and giving witness. A case that might have significant ramifications for workers requesting religious accommodations from their employers is set for consideration by the U.S. Supreme Court on April 18. The High Court will hear oral arguments on Gruff and DeJoy. The lawsuit was filed by an evangelical Christian and former U.S. Postal Service employee who refused a reasonable accommodation to celebrate his Sunday Sabbath by not taking Sunday shifts. The post office reached an agreement to deliver some Amazon packages on Sundays, and Groff sought accommodations to not work on those shifts. He was initially accommodated, then disciplined for his refusal to work on Sundays. He later resigned to avoid violating his religious convictions. Groff alleged in federal court that the U.S. Postal Service failed to provide him with reasonable accommodations for his religious practices. Panama's Supreme Court has ruled the same-sex marriage is not a human right, and the country therefore does not have the right to recognize such unions. A lawsuit was filed in 2016 by a same-sex couple who received legal recognition of marriage abroad and wished for their union to be recognized in Panama. The case went through several appeals in which the plaintiffs argued that the current family codes were unconstitutional because they only recognized marriage between a man and a woman. The court said gay marriage lacks conventional and constitutional recognition. The court added that the family code was objectively and reasonably justified in the general interest of giving precedence to those unions capable of establishing families, giving continuity to the human population, and therefore to society. After months of disagreement, a six-party Turkish alliance on Monday picked the leader of the biggest opposition party, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, as its consensus candidate to take on President Recep Tayyip Erdogan in the May elections. After a crucial coalition member who had rejected Kılıçdaroğlu's candidature agreed to a compromise and rejoined the grouping, the alliance chose the leader of the pro-secular, center-left Republican People's Party. Turkey will hold crucial presidential and parliamentary elections on May 14 that could either change the direction of the nation towards democracy or prolong Erdogan's increasingly authoritarian leadership. Erdogan is expected to be more vulnerable in this election than in the ones before because of the nation's economic woes and the mistakes made by the administration during the devastating earthquakes. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and House Republicans have given the American people an opportunity to dramatically strengthen the role of parents in the education of their children. House Republicans introduced H.R. 5, the Parents' Bill of Rights, to protect parents' rights to know what is happening to their children in school. This bill dramatically strengthens the role of parents in education. The Parents' Bill of Rights is the first bill McCarthy introduced in a press conference. McCarthy said today millions of children are being taught fake history, discriminatory values, and various sexual values that should be left to their parents to teach. At the same time, too many schools are simply not teaching academic basics such as math, reading, and language. As a result, more and more parents have demanded access to information about what the schools are teaching their children, he said. According to Georgetown University's Center for Applied Research and the Apostolate, or CARA, between 1969 and 2019, Catholic marriages in the United States fell by 69%, even though the Catholic population expanded by about 20 million. Yet the fall is being fueled by a larger cultural dating crisis that is making it difficult for single Catholics to connect in person or even online. According to a 2020 Pew Research, 47% of Americans believe that dating had gotten harder in the previous 10 years, while only 19% believed the opposite. Both pointed to technology as a major factor. A United Nations report made on Monday at the Human Rights Council in Geneva says a crime against humanity may have been committed considering how the Taliban treats women and girls in Afghanistan. As the Taliban took over in August 2021, they severely restricted the freedom and rights of women, especially their access to higher education. Richard Bennett, the UN Special Rapporteur on the status of human rights in Afghanistan, found that the Taliban's treatment of women and children may amount to gender persecution, a crime against humanity, in a report covering the period of July to December 2022. Bennett said the cumulative effect of the restrictions on women and girls has a devastating long-term impact on the whole population and equals to gender apartheid. The Catholic Church is growing in Hong Kong, though at a slower rate than a few years ago. According to diocesan statistics, in 1999, there were about 347,000 Catholics in the diocese, comprising 5.2% of the population. 20 years later, in 2019, there were 611,000 that represented 8.2% of the population. Bishop Stephen Chow of the Hong Kong Diocese said in his pastoral letter for Lent that they hope to celebrate some 1,700 baptisms on Easter. However, this is half of those recorded in the past. He blamed the complex political environment in Hong Kong, the escalating pressure from the Chinese government, including the arrest of Cardinal Joseph Zen, as the reasons for the dip in the number of baptisms. Most of the converts in Hong Kong are ancestor worshippers or people who do not profess any faith. President Novak of Hungary has stressed the importance of the nation's Christian roots. She made this assertion in New York on Sunday, March 5th, where she gave a talk at the event hosted by Bonum Commune Foundation. Novak told the assembled intellectuals that Hungary is a Christian country by definition and by its faith, and that it is reflected in its way of life and traditions. She said that Hungarian politics is based on respect for work and human dignity and the protection of family and children. She added that the country's efforts to help persecuted Christians worldwide has reached some 1 million people. Novak is set to speak at a meeting of the UN Committee on the Status of Women, where she will focus on the importance of families. And those are your latest headlines. Do join us tomorrow. In the meantime, you can visit swnews.org for more updates. Shalom.